story to tell.
Joining me around the table, Mo Alathe, Communications Director for the Democratic National Committee, political handicapper Stu Rothenberg of the famed Rothenberg Political Report, and Sean Spicer, Communications Director for the Republican National Committee. So, Stu, despite the president's advice to Democrats running for office, his favorable ratings are in the low 40s. Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, also in the low 40s in approval. How good of advice is this, especially to vulnerable Democrats running in states that Mitt Romney won?
Well, it's good advice for Democrats running in very Democratic districts, but they probably don't need the advice. Yeah, you're exactly right, Kenny. The problem is there are a lot of Democrats running in Senate races in states where Mitt Romney carried it. And defending ACA is really a dangerous game for those Democrats. They're trying to really finesse the race where they're running as independent Democrats, not national Democrats, talking about the president's premier national accomplishment and issue. Could be a problem.
Yeah, Mo, I want to play you the first ad that Mary Landrieu, running for re-election in Louisiana for the Senate. This is the first ad she put out. It was in December.
Hundreds of thousands of people across the country losing their current coverage.
The administration is under pressure to act fast.
What I've said to the president is, you told them that they could keep it.
Landrieu has introduced the Keeping the Affordable Care Act promise.
I'm fixing it, and that's what my bill does, and I've urged the president to fix it.
Senator Landrieu says President Obama needs to stick to his word.
The truth is, you don't really care if she runs that ad, right? As long as she returns to the Senate with a D by her name.
Well, look, I care about the fact that Mary Landrieu, in that ad, was promising people that she's going to fix and make the law work better, and the law is working better today, and more people are benefiting from it. And I think that's why you're actually going to see more Democrats take the president's advice and talk about the contrast.
You think Mary Landrieu will?
Well, here's the difference. Mary Landrieu is absolutely going to say, and I think Democrats all across the country are going to say, there is a difference between our side and their side. Our side supports this law, making it work better. Their side wants to take it away. People don't want that fight anymore, right? The one thing that is much more unpopular than the Affordable Care Act is repealing the Affordable Care Act. And people are tired of the fight that Sean and his side keep pushing.
In truth, Sean, there is some debate within the Republican Party now whether you ought to just drop the repeal part and start talking about changing it and fixing it. I want to remind you of something that your chairman said when he was on this show talking about Obamacare and the effects a couple months ago.
This issue is going to be toxic for the Democrats, and believe me, we will tattoo it to their foreheads in 2014. We will run on it, and they will lose because of it.
Is that still what Republicans are going to run on? Are you a one-note party at this point?
It's clear that Obamacare is still the number 1, number 2, and number 3 issue going into this election. And the Mary Landrieu ad is typical of what we're seeing from races throughout this country, where the Democrats are running from it, distancing themselves, talking about things that they've done. They won't talk about the fact that they were the deciding vote, that they were out there advocating for it, that they want to implement it. They're talking about how they can distance themselves from it. So, in my opinion, I hope they take the president's advice, frankly, for our sake. But race after race, the reason that we're expanding the map, that Oregon, Minnesota, New Hampshire, Virginia are getting more and more into play is because it's working.
First of all, none of that is true, that those states are, that Oregon, Virginia, New Hampshire are actually becoming more and more in play.
Really?
But separate from that, there are only 3 places in the country where people agree with you that Obamacare is the number 1, number 2, and number 3 issue. That's at the Republican National Committee headquarters, the National Republican Congressional Committee headquarters, and the Senate Committee headquarters. You guys and your consultants are the only ones. The American people could not be more clear that they want to get back to talking about it.
I hope you do believe that. I really hope that you believe that that's true, because I would love to, can't wait till I see Majority Leader McConnell, Speaker Boehner.
He won't be in the Senate next year.
Let me ask you, I mean, they don't. I mean, look, clearly in the Senate, the Democrats are going to give free rein to their folks and say, do what you have to do to get reelected.
Sure, and that's what Landrieu's ad was. The subtext was, I disagree with the president on this. Don't lump us together. But on the other hand, boy, it's hard for me to believe that the Republicans can run from now to November just on ACA.
Well, look, the number of Americans that are disappointed with Obamacare in the last Gallup poll, this isn't some made-up thing, this is the Gallup poll, it's 54%. The numbers of people, and the stories continue. Just this week, we saw a number of widows in Alabama lose their insurance because of this. The stories continue of the number of people losing their doctors, their plans, and their insurance rates going up through the roof.
I agree with Sean that when you get additional anecdotes, Republicans will use that to make their point. On the other hand, I think the cake has been baked on ACA, Candy. I mean, I don't think there are a whole bunch of people changing their opinions now.
It's a big cake.
So while on one hand the Republicans keep it simple, stupid, okay, they got one message, you have one message, Sean, that's a fine message. They got to talk about growth and jobs and what the president does or has not done.
Stu, let me get you to kick off a discussion about a specific race, Mitch McConnell. He has now, at least for this past quarter, been outraised by his Democratic opponent. He's polling terribly, both in approval and, running fairly even with her. How much trouble is the Republican leader of the Senate really in?
Well, I think the race is competitive. It's in play. It's one of the few opportunities Democrats have. I wouldn't oversell it for this reason. Right now, all the analysis, all the context is about the Republican primary. So people who support Matt Bevin, the Republican challenger to Mitch McConnell, will not say they're supporting Mitch McConnell in the general election. Yet those are Republican voters who will support him against Alice.
And yet the approval ratings seem to at least, I mean, he's really
personally unpopular.
They don't like him in the state. And it used to be that if you had a candidate who was below 50%, who was returning and was below 50%, he was toast.
For all of the Republican bluster about the president's approval ratings or the ACA's approval ratings, both the president and the ACA are more popular in Kentucky than Mitch McConnell is. I mean, he's in very, very real trouble in Kentucky. It is financially competitive. It is competitive in the polling. Allison Landrieu Grimes is running a fantastic campaign. I would be very surprised if he even returns as Republican leader. I'll be surprised if he returns to the Senate next year.
Mitch McConnell will not only return, but he'll be the leader, a majority leader. And that's because, I mean, for all the talk about Allison Landrieu Grimes, the president's approval rating is low. Yes, she outraised him by a smidge in a quarter. His cash on hand is significantly higher.
Twice as much.
Right. Yeah. So this is, as Stu pointed out, I mean, I think this is a Washington parlor game. When it comes down to it, her approval ratings aren't great. She has not run a great campaign.
Let me turn to Iowa, where you had what looked like, in Sean, you talked about expanding the map, and one of the places they're now expanding the map is in Iowa, which looked as though the Democratic candidate, Bruce Braley, would win. And then Bruce Braley went to fundraise in front of some trial lawyers. He himself is a lawyer. He's a congressman now from Iowa, running for Senate. He goes to Texas. He's fundraising in front of a bunch of trial lawyers. And he talked about if the Senate turns Republican, that meant that the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee would be Chuck Grassley, who is a long-standing Republican from Iowa. And here's what he said about Chuck Grassley.
You might have a farmer from Iowa who never went to law school, never practiced law, serving as the next chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Big mistake.
Well, I mean, look, I think Bruce Braley apologized for that comment, and most people will move on. And here's why I do think it's going to be enough, because Bruce Braley actually has a long history of fighting for Iowa farmers and fighting for Iowans versus either of the two Republican candidates. Remember, these elections are contrasts, and anyone that thought Iowa wasn't going to be competitive doesn't know the state of Iowa. But we do know that whomever he is up against opposes the Farm Bill, opposes or supports the Ryan budget, which cuts funding for agriculture and rural communities. Whereas Bruce Braley has been in support of those things. So I think he'll do fine with that contract.
Iowa's one of the top 3 agricultural states. You start insulting farmers.
Right, and that's the thing is
their programs.
This is a sort of an inside Washington analogy, but this is like Martha Coakley insulting, Fenway and Red Sox fans, not knowing who Kurt Schilling was. So I think, to your point, going to Iowa and insulting farmers, and then it was made, here's the problem, it wasn't just one mistake. Then he posted a picture of a farm on his Facebook page that was from England. So he tried to dig himself out of the hole and dug himself deeper. And insulting farmers in Iowa is like insulting Red Sox fans in Boston. It doesn't work.
If you all think that is going to trump your candidate's opposition for the Farm Bill and support for the Ryan budget that hurts their communities, then I think that's more insulting to the farmers than anything else.
Button this up, Stu.
Where this race really is. It's a competitive race that leans Democratic because the president carried with 52% last time. Republicans have 2 credible candidates, Mark Jacobs, the former CEO of Reliant Energy, and Joni Ernst, the state senator from the southwestern corner of the state. You get an election where it's about the president, and Bruce Braley is in big trouble. If it's about the Republicans and the Tea Party and making it about the Republican candidates, then Braley's got a better chance. But it's certainly competitive with a slight Democratic edge.
I want to ask you about a different race in our final minutes, and that is West Virginia, something that you all have, believe is locked down in your column, in the Republican column. There was a really interesting article, I think, from Sean Trend, who is, a conservative, who said, whoa, we may be just a little too optimistic about this race. And he set out an analysis which basically said, I can see how Democrats actually might win some seats coming up, and here's how. And one of the things he said was he would not be surprised to wake up the day after the elections and find out that the Democrat, Natalie Tennant, held on to the seat rather than the Republican you all are counting on.
I think that he might wake up in a dream state, but that would be as close as Shelley Moore Capito her family's been an institution in West Virginia. She's ran a fabulous campaign. She's represented the 1st District tremendously well, and she's a household name there because she's done a great job fighting for the people of West Virginia. Natalie Tennant has tried before. Her husband ran against Shelley and lost. And this has become a family affair, running against Shelley.
One of the things is that you're also running against history here, because West Virginia has a very firm tradition of putting Democrats in those
right, and you look at Joe Manchin, who just ran, it was a former governor, ran for the Senate, and he's running as far as he can away from the Democratic Party. They might do well in state races and even to some degree at the gubernatorial level, but when it comes to federal races, it has shifted tremendously to the
Although I will say this, one of the things I really like about the playing field for us this cycle, and West Virginia is a good example of this, is the number of Republican House members that they are running for these Senate seats. The Republicans in the House of Representatives are about the most toxic brand you will find anywhere in any poll. And the fact that these are the people who are supporting the Ryan budget, and that are so out of touch with most Americans, that are now that they're trying to put up statewide. It is why places like Georgia, it is why in state after state after state, I really like our chances.
Okay, I'm at the end here of my time, but I need the three of you to quickly give me what will surprise me the day after the election in terms of a Senate race.
I think Democrats are going to pick up both really competitive Republican seats in Kentucky and in Georgia.
I think probably Udall loses in Colorado to Cory Gardner in a race that 3 months ago we would have said is off the table.
Wow, that's your expanded map.
Great recruiting.
I think New Hampshire, Oregon, Minnesota, and Virginia all trend our way, and we pick them up.
I like a positive guy. We'll bring you back if that happens.
We will pick up seats in the House as well. I know that's
nothing like some Easter humor from you, Sean. I love it.
Sean Spicer, Stu Rothenberg, Mo Olathe, thank you all for joining us on an Easter weekend. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Up next, the Pope's Easter message.